Welcome back. We are nearing the end of the first installment of the Lord of the Rings. We are almost at the end of the Fellowship of the Rings. As you can see, this is what I have left. And today we are going to discuss Gandalf's bravery and just some of his last moments in this book. So let's get started. Okay, so I'm at the point where they're deciding whether they should go through the mines of Moria, and they don't have too many options, or at least good options at this point in their journey. They know it's very dangerous, and Aragorn actually issues kind of an interesting warning, an ominous warning, almost a prophetic warning to Gandalf. And so Gandalf is asking who will follow him to the mines of Moria. He says, "Who will follow me if I lead you there?" "I will," said Gimli eagerly. "I will," said Aragorn heavily. "You followed my lead almost to disaster in the snow and have said no word of blame. I will follow your lead now, if this last warning does not move you. It is not of the ring nor of us others that I am thinking now, but of you, Gandalf. And I say to you, if you pass the doors of Moria, beware." So it's just an interesting warning that he almost knows what's going on in a sense. And we'll kind of see what actually unfolds as we continue to read the story. And then the next moment I wanted to read is another moment of Aragorn speaking, and he's encouraging everyone in this moment, and also he's speaking well of Gandalf and of his bravery, and we'll see here. And so by this point, they've already entered Moria, and this is what he has to say to them. "Do not be afraid," said Aragorn. There was a pause longer than usual, and Gandalf and Gimli were whispering together. The others were crowded behind, waiting anxiously. "Do not be afraid. I have been with him on many a journey, if never on one so dark. And there are tales of Rivendell, of greater deeds of his than any that I have seen. He will not go astray, if there is any path to find. He has led us in here against our fears, but he will lead us out again at whatever cost to himself." So obviously the key part I want to focus on here is he has led us in here against our fears, but he will lead us out again at whatever cost to himself. And it's just an emphasis on who Gandalf is at his core. And it also is a stark contrast with Saruman, who was all about himself and ensuring that he would be fine in the age to come and doing everything to benefit himself. And it's just showing the great contrast of how Gandalf would literally do anything to ensure that the group gets out alive. So we go on, they come to the bridge of Khazad-dûm, which is towards the very end of the cave and right before they leave the cave. So at this point, they know there is something very dangerous following them, which is a Balrog. And so Gandalf is doing everything he can to ward him off, to fight him, and to get everyone else out safely. And even in this, as he keeps telling them, go, like, leave me be, I'll figure it out. I just need you guys to get out of here. Aragorn and Boromir are very bravely staying behind and helping him fight until the last moment, basically. So I'm just going to read this part here. "Over the bridge," cried Gandalf, recalling his strength. "Fly. This is a foe beyond any of you. I must hold the narrow way. Fly." Aragorn and Boromir did not heed the command, but still held their ground, side by side, behind Gandalf at the far end of the bridge. The others halted just within the doorway at the hall's end and turned, unable to leave their leader to face the enemy alone. And so it just speaks such volumes of how brave this whole company was and how willing they were to fight. And there's another part where Boromir is just until the very last moment fighting, same with Aragorn. As they're leading them out, Aragorn leads them and Boromir is at the end. And so they're just some of the bravest men that are willing to risk everything in order to even their very lives just to protect this whole fellowship. And I especially wanted to mention that about Boromir because often, especially people that watch the movies, they kind of see Aragorn as the brave one and Boromir as a more selfish and you know, obviously that moment does happen at one point where he gets overcome by the ring, but also as we know, nobody can withstand the power of the ring. And in the movies, his death is portrayed very bravely, of course. But I just wanted to emphasize how brave he's being here and not selfish. And I believe that that's his true self, his true identity without the influence of the ring and just his best self, where he will give his life to protect others and, you know, doesn't think twice about himself. And I just think it's a very, very honorable characteristic of his and Aragorn's. And I just, wanted to mention that too. Okay, and then the last part of this chapter, this intense chapter, I want to read now. The Balrog reached the bridge. Gandalf stood in the middle of the span, leaning on the staff in his left hand, but in his other hand, Blammed ring gleamed, cold and white. His enemy halted again, facing him, and the shadow about it reached out like two vast wings. It raised the whip, and the thongs whined and cracked. Fire came from its nostrils, but Gandalf stood firm. You cannot pass, he said. The orcs stood still, and a dead silence fell. I am a servant of the secret fire, wielder of the flame of Anor. You cannot pass. The dark fire will not avail you, flame of Odin. Go back to the shadow. You cannot pass. The Balrog made no answer. The fire in it seemed to die, but the darkness grew. It stepped forward slowly onto the bridge, and suddenly it drew itself up to a great height, and its wings were spread from wall to wall. But still Gandalf could be seen, glimmering in the gloom. He seemed small and altogether alone, gray and bent like a wizened tree before the onset of a storm. From out of the shadow a red sword leaped flaming. Glamdring glittered white in answer. There was a ringing clash and a stab of white fire. The Balrog fell back, and its sword flew up in molten fragments. The wizard swayed on the bridge, stepped back a pace, and then again stood still. You cannot pass, he said. With a bound, the Balrog leaped full upon the bridge. Its whip whirled and hissed. He cannot stand alone, cried Aragorn suddenly, and ran back along the bridge. Elendil, he shouted, I am with you, Gandalf. Gondor, cried Boromir, and leaped after him. At that moment, Gandalf lifted his staff, and crying aloud, he smote the bridge before him. The staff broke asunder and fell from his hand. A blinding sheet of white flame sprang up, the bridge cracked. Right at the Balrog's feet it broke, and the stone upon which it stood crashed into the gulf, while the rest remained poised, quivering like a tongue of rock thrust out into emptiness. With a terrible cry, the Balrog fell forward, and its shadow plunged down and vanished. But even as it fell, it swung its whip, and the thongs lashed and curled about the wizard's knees, dragging him to the brink. He staggered and fell, grasped vainly at the stone, and slid into the abyss. Fly, you fools, he cried, and was gone. So, that is the moment when Gandalf leaves the Fellowship in the first book. And I think this is one scene that the movies do especially well, because I think it's a good scene to bring to life, because it's one thing to read it, but they do a really good job in the film of bringing the intensity of the moment. And so, that moment is the moment of the ultimate bravery and sacrifice of Gandalf. And just as Aragorn had forewarned, he did not make it out with them out of the cave. And I just think it's a really powerful moment of sacrifice and literally giving himself up to save his friends and ensure that darkness could be defeated once and for all. He was aiding this journey from the start, and even with his life, he gave it all for them to be able to complete the mission. With that, we'll leave off of The Fellowship of the Ring, the book for this week, and we'll continue next week. I did want to read something that I thought was very powerful and applicable in these times. I know that on a global scale, things are uncertain. There's a lot of fears that people may have. Anytime you flip on the news, there's something horrible on or another thing to worry about. And I saw a paragraph that was written by C.S. Lewis in 1948 that resonated deeply, because it reminds you to recenter, to not live in fear, and to truly live your life. So he says, if we are all going to be destroyed by an atomic bomb, let that bomb, when it comes, find us doing sensible and human things. Praying, working, teaching, reading, listening to music, bathing the children, playing tennis, chatting to our friends over a pint and a game of darts. Not huddled together like frightened sheep and thinking about bombs. They may break our bodies, a microbe can do that, but they need not dominate our minds. I'll leave you with that.